everyone here knows that we are living in times which are anything but normal. And in this context, business and even marketing needs to be reinvented. But this is something that all of us as marketers also know deep inside, that run of the mill marketing tactics are no longer going to work because customers are looking for experiences and not just products. So, this webinar actually seeks to uncover how brands can leverage AR and VR technologies using some of these experiences and create some of these experiences. Today's discussions will uncover a variety of areas, and looking at doing defining AR and VR for you, talking about extended reality 360 video, talking about web AR and VR, and how can brands adopt these? What are the challenges in adoption? How can we integrate it into existing digital platforms and so on? So we put together a very expert panel of industry experts who very nicely consented to join us today. Let me introduce some of them to you. Our moderator and panelist is Anish Kurapati. He's the founder of Vernaculars in Tripwana. And kudos to him because he's joining us at 6 a.m. in the morning from California. He's a technologist by education, a management consultant by profession, a photographer, videographer, and an extended reality developer by passion. Prior to this, Anish was working with companies like McKinsey, Hewlett Packard, and Equinix. Our next panelist is Vivek Jain. He's the founder of Flipart, which is a startup based out of Bangalore and is a technology platform that helps brands connect and engage with their customers through stories using augmented reality. He previously founded a web development company called Strap Business with a college friend, and he exited that in 2015. Vivek loves coffee, he loves beer, and the underwater world. The next panelist we have is Ashwin Jaishankar, who's the founder and CEO at Autoverse, an award-winning startup that is developing photorealistic AR and VR experiences for enterprises. Over the last 2 years, Ashwin has worked with brands like Bosch, Shell, Volvo, Gojek, TVS Motors, and has deployed a vast number of AR and VR experiences. He's a mechanical engineer from BITS Pilani and has worked in the AR VR space since 2014. Our final panelist is Advait Dudu. He's the CEO of Alive Now, and his global creative tech studio is the official augmented reality partner of Facebook and Instagram. And Advait has launched over 250 AR experiences in the last 2 years. There are a few ground rules that I'd possibly like to state to you before we get started. Requesting all participants to mute yourselves as well as to turn off your videos. That will allow us a little more bandwidth here. And if you were to drop out or we have connectivity issues during the webinar, please feel free to use the same link as you used to join it, and you can rejoin us. If you have trouble logging into Zoom at any time during this webinar, we are also streaming this live on our Facebook, the Ad Club Facebook page, and you can watch the entire webinar there and even at a later date. We'd love to have questions from you, so please use the chat window in Zoom and try and ask us your questions there. We'll try our best to uncover as many of them as we can. This is going to be a really insightful session, and all of us are really looking forward to it. So we also look forward to hearing from you either here, or you can go on to one of our social handles, join the handles, send us your comments there. And lastly, I'd love to invite you to stay connected with us at the Ad Club of Bangalore. Our website address is www.adclubbangalore.net. It's .net, so just please note that. Without much ado, I'm going to dive into the specifics and give you our expert panel. Anish, over to you. Thank you. Anish is on mute. Can we unmute him?
Sorry, can you hear me now? So thank you, Tina. Thank you to the Advertising Club for organizing this, and welcome all of our participants. I'd like to begin just by providing a little bit of an overview on what is XR, because it's sort of a very confusing term. XR technically stands for extended reality, but it's really a conglomeration of technologies, everything from 360 photographs and videos, which is literally a photograph that you're inside a sphere and you can look all around you, up, down, left, right, everywhere, as if you were actually there in real life. The second one is augmented reality. augmented reality is when you're looking at the real world, but you can drop a virtual object into that real space, right? And then there's virtual reality, where you are inside a headset and all you can see is what's in the headset. So you can't actually see the real world. So it's much more active. And what you could see in the headset could be either a 360 photograph or a completely virtual environment like the surface of Mars or the Moon. So that's the core of what XR is. And there are other variations of things like mixed reality and so on, but it's technical. Um, with that, I'd like us to explore, as Tina said, a couple of things. First of all, why does this matter, right? How is this different from every other sort of advertising technology that has come before, or medium, whether it's print or radio or television? Um, and one of the elements that's really different is this notion of, you'll hear the word experiential and immersive a lot. So let's start there. Advait and Vivek, Ashwin, could you elaborate a little bit on what does this mean, right? And maybe you could use some examples from your work.
Sure. Hey, Anish, thank you so much for the question. I think before I answer the question, I think now is a good time to play the short 1-minute video. This will give everyone a perspective when I go on to answer the question. So
okay, great.
The admin can play the short video, which gives an overview of some of the augmented reality work that we've done. My answer will make more sense to all the participants as well.
Great.
Thank you so much. So I think the one thing that you would have seen that stood out in the video is pretty much for all the experiences, the user's face is on the screen. Now, if you think about the history of media and advertising, especially on the web, and more recently for the last 10 to 15 years, where the smartphone and the mobile phone is pretty much become the go-to piece of tech for everyone, an extended part of us. If you look at the history of advertising on the smartphone itself, it's always been about swiping up and down, scrolling left and right, clicking, and pretty two-dimensional. With augmented reality and web AR, it's for the first time that you're actually able to interact by your face, your lips, your hand. It detects gestures. So it's a truly, truly immersive experience where you are using your front camera, you're using the back camera, where you're actually bringing products to life by scanning them. You can actually place products in your real environment to scale, see if it fits. So the possibilities of what you can do with augmented reality are truly, truly endless. And even though the phone itself and the screen on the phone is still two-dimensional, because of the experiences that you can build on augmented reality, it feels 3D, it feels immersive, and it feels very, very realistic. So that's the first, kind of answer to your question about immersive. And the second thing to keep in mind is augmented reality as a technology has actually existed for almost 8 to 10 years, or maybe even more. But the last 2 to 3 years, brands and agencies and companies and in general are able to look at AR at scale for a couple of reasons. One, because thanks to social platforms that started with Snapchat and then now with Facebook and Instagram, the apps themselves as a platform have allowed tech companies and developers like us and the others to build AR experiences into their app. So a brand which already has an audience on their Facebook and on their Instagram can now expose their audience to AR experiences. The second big reason is in the last 3 to 4 years, smartphones itself, the processing power of smartphones has improved so much that probably none of these AR experiences would have been possible about 5 or 6 years ago. So these two, I think, are huge factors that have helped, balloon the augmented reality industry. So our expertise is more AR. I think in terms of VR, Anish and some of the other panelists can, share their inputs. And VR, I think there's 10x or 20x more you can do in VR versus AR. But in VR, of course, you are dependent on the device.
Vivek, you've been doing work in AR as well, right? So can you chat a little bit about what you've been doing? You're on mute as well, so you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, okay, that's good. All right. Yeah. So good evening, everybody. So I'm sure most of us over here will agree that stories they're probably one of the most powerful means for brands to basically inspire and influence, right? And it's also very evident that products attached with stories are perceived to be of higher value than products with just descriptions. And I think immersive tech like AR and VR, they're fantastic tools or tech to basically get brands to communicate their stories to whomever that is. So this was just a quick thing. So this is a couple of weeks back. I was on a call with my friend, old friend from college, and this guy lives in Chikmagalur. So obviously he's in the coffee business. I asked him to actually send me some coffee powder, which he actually did surprisingly, and I got it a couple of days back. Right. The next question for me was, how do I make the decoction? Right, because it was just a powder. So imagine if the product packaging could actually talk to me and say, "Man, this is how you make the decoction." Right. So imagine where I point my phone onto the product packaging. It could actually give me a beautiful story of how these guys started their business. How the coffee is made, and of course, how you can make the decoction out of it. I think that's the power of what AR can do. So what I want to do is talk to you quickly about one of the projects that we did with the Department of Tourism, Government of Karnataka, right? So Bangalore basically is, it's got a lot of stuff for tourists to do. It's just that a lot of people come here for work or they're in transit and they don't end up spending a lot of time here, which is what was the objective of the Department of Tourism. In this context, just think of Bangalore, the city of Bangalore, to be a brand or a product, and think of the Government of Karnataka as the owner of the brand. Shraval, if I can request you to play the video, please. All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, sure. So that was a quick overview of what we did. And so we basically had these postcards that we had made for the city of Bangalore. And to a surprise, a very simple experience. And the key takeaways for me with this project primarily was, so we ran a lot of experiments, and we realized something that's very simple works extremely well, and which is what happened with the postcards. And you saw the postcards actually reached to 30 different countries and over 250 cities in India. So I think that was phenomenal reach. Great content actually helped. Beautiful illustrations, and of course, on top of it, having some interesting content helped. Great distribution channels. Of course, we found the other interesting thing was the product itself, which was a postcard. Right, for a lot of them, it's nostalgic. For a lot of youngsters, it was a very new experience, and they went sort of berserk using a product. Just if I have another minute, maybe I can just show another product video of how the postcards work. Yeah. Shaval, if you can please play that. Right. So this is the mobile app interface, and what you're seeing is through the mobile screen. So I'm sure most of you know of the Blossom Book.
Blossom Book House, the iconic bookstore on Church Street, has become nearly synonymous with Bengaluru for book lovers.
Pure Blossom. Yeah, so this was one of the experiences that we actually triggered, or rather enabled for the department, and it was a super successful project, though extremely simple. So, yeah.
Great. So let's shift to some VR examples. Ashwin, can you talk a little bit about VR?
Sure. Yeah. So with virtual reality, obviously when it started in 2016, right? We had the main appeal at that point was firstly just the simple wow factor of the technology, being able to put on a headset and be transported to another virtual world, right? And we saw, in malls in the first couple of years, what you saw was a lot of these very simplistic experiences that just capitalized on that simple wow factor of just the technology. And so you saw a lot of these, walking on a plank across two skyscrapers, roller coaster experiences, etc., which are very entry level stuff, and where people are just beginning to scratch the surface of what is possible with virtual reality, right? But as people grew more accustomed to it, we understood what the technology is capable of. The hardware itself started becoming more widespread. We started seeing a lot more complex narratives coming in, and so I'll actually use one of our the projects we did for IFB, right, to showcase this. So Shaval, if you could play that video, I'll just talk over it. So to give you a little context while Shaval lines up the video, so IFB sell home appliances, right? So we basically we signed a deal with IFB to deploy virtual reality headsets in 500 showrooms across the country. So when customers walk in, they'd put on the headset, they'd actually see a washing machine in front of them. They'd be able to add detergent here, as you can see, actually go inside the washing machine and see how it works. So all these features, which are, say, slightly complex and that you would usually rely on a salesperson to explain to you, you're now in a small 3-4 minute experience where using your hands, you can interact with stuff, pick stuff up, and explore it for yourself. The dishwasher is particularly, it's a product that Indians don't use, and so this is where we saw the metrics did really well, because you can see the user pick up kadais, pressure cookers, Indian utensils which are stained with Indian curry and masala stains, right? And put it inside the dishwasher, and then you go inside the dishwasher and see how it works. So again, this is something that a lot of people were skeptical about, how the dishwasher would actually help them, how it will actually clean. And so here you can see all these, like the steam, the water, how exactly it cleans. And so we had some great metrics there. With an AC, it's just purely that story, that you walk in on a hot summer day, you pick up the remote, you turn on the AC, and then with these visualizations. It shows you how it actually cools the room down before breaking apart the AC and enabling you to interact with each part and seeing why exactly each of these features are technologically superior. So what this technology does is it invites your user into a world designed around your product, right? And it helps them basically, I mean, explore it for themselves. Um, what you can do then is democratize your messaging. Um, it's it's a it's basically just a great way to make an impact on them. And of course, I'll get into that a little bit later. You start seeing, even though it does take some effort to develop this sort of content, the metrics that you get, the impact that you make on your customer is on a whole different level compared to traditional media.
Yeah. So great points. I think when I think of XR, and a lot of you touched on this, I really think of three words: immersive, interactive, and intuitive. Immersive puts you in the experience. So in your case, Ashwin, it was you're actually inside the dishwasher, seeing how it works, right? Um, Interactive is all the elements you talked about with Vivek, where you're actually, you have gesture interfaces and all of that. And intuitive is because it's how you're interacting with the product is it's either voice or it's very visual, it's very gesture focused. Um, if you put those three things together, that to me is sort of the definition of what experiential means, right? Now, one thing I'd like to point out, in addition to everything that came out, is um, VR and AR are great ways of making an emotional connection with what a brand actually stands for. So I'll give you an example. We did a piece of work with Flex, which is the largest contract manufacturer in the world. One of their biggest industries is automotive, but they don't make the car. They make all the parts that go into the car, right? And their tagline is "Create the Extraordinary." Now, what would they typically do? They have a whole series of trade shows, whether it's the Consumer Electronics Show, the Detroit Motor Show, and these come sort of one after the other. They actually put a car on the floor, right? They put a physical car on the floor, and they bring these products, which are big, heavy, ugly-looking products. They're parts of cars, um, and but that you can only bring so many parts, right? And having a real car on the floor takes up a lot of space. What we did instead, and if you can play the video, there's a little bit. It'll give you a visual view of what this experience was like. So you can see there's a car on the floor. And then we just blew it up. The whole car just explodes. All the parts are all around you. So this was at the Consumer Electronics Show, and what it does is it puts you inside the car, we blow up the car, and suddenly you understand the complexity of what Flex is actually doing. There's so many different parts of that automobile that just wouldn't work if it wasn't for Flex. So create the extraordinary, yeah, there's some extraordinary engineering going on there. The other part of that is you want to talk about the future, right? And so when we blew up the car, but when we bring it back, it comes back as a different car. It's an autonomous vehicle of the future. And now you go on a test drive in this autonomous vehicle and you suddenly understand the use case. Oh, there's a LiDAR scanner. There's all these other new interfaces inside the car because the vehicle is now autonomous. And you start to see how those technologies are enabling a autonomous future and how that is improving your life. right? So to bring it, back full circle, it's really, I would really think about those three terms: immersive, interactive, intuitive. And to me, one of the biggest powers, in addition to all of the things the panelists talked about, like visualizing the product, being able to configure the product, all of which has shown that the 70% of users, at least in the United States, are more likely to buy the product if they can do that. But then there's also this ability to connect to the essence of the brand. Which brings us to the next question, which is, okay, what is all that worth? Like, how do I measure, right? Any campaign at the end of the day is really, is this campaign working, right? So how are we able to say that this is effective, this notion of experiential and immersive, and it's making a big difference above all of the other marketing methods? So I'd invite the panelists to kind of talk about what are you thinking about in terms of ROI conversations with your clients? What kind of metrics are you looking at? Who wants to go first?
So interesting question, Anish. I think some of the metrics and analytics do remain the same, but because in AR there's new and different things you're doing, there are new metrics and analytics that you're measuring. So when you talk about social AR, so social AR is basically augmented reality on Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram. Their platform actually gives you three very good metrics to measure a success of a campaign, which is impressions, captures, and shares. So impressions is pretty straightforward. That's there in any media buying plan. Now, captures is something new that is only in AR. So the platform actually measures how many people captured a video or a photo using the augmented reality experience. So that's an important metric to track. And then shares is another important metric, because many times what brands like to do on Instagram is they encourage their audiences to use this augmented reality experience, like maybe try on glasses, put on a lipstick, or in our case, for some of the work that we've done with Amazon Prime, Inside Edge is a pretty famous web series in India. It's about cricket. So we did a augmented reality filter where the user puts on a cricket helmet and can pick a team that they support. So, it was a bit of a gamification there. It says, okay, put on the helmet of the team that you support and share, right? And then there's some interesting stuff that you could do there as well. So in terms of social AR, I think the metrics are impressions, captures, and shares. There's 2 or 3 other very important metrics that we measure in web AR. So usually web AR experiences are where you have to place a product in your real world and try it out, or even try on glasses and all that. So one metric is time spent. So we've seen that any product page that has an AR experience added onto it, anywhere between 80 to 150% increase in time spent, primarily because first there's a 3D object of the product itself that they can play around with, and then there's a button right there where it says either try it on or place it in your environment, and then with a click of a button and no need to install any app because it's web AR, you place the product there and see how it looks. Now, another very interesting metric that we measured, and this is something where we worked with a furniture rental company in the US, where one metric that really helped them is the number of returns went down, because using augmented reality, the customer could actually make sure that the product fits in the size that they have. So the number of returns were, due to a size, whether it's too small or too big, went down a lot, right? So that's another interesting metric that we measure. So there's a decrease in the number of product returns. So I think these are just a few new or different metrics that that you have to measure. And finally, I think the most important metric is will adding all these immersive experiences and 3D of objects and augmented reality. At the end of the day, there's X amount of investment. Is it converting to any kind of lift in sales or an increase in conversion in e-commerce? So I think that is the most important metric in addition to some of these that I've mentioned.
Vivek, what about what you've seen?
Yeah, sure. So I agree with Advait in terms of a lot of the metrics remain the same. For example, your engagement time, your click-through rates, the traffic to the landing page. But one interesting thing that was a great test for us also was there's a lot of talk about AR being a buzz and it's probably a one-time gimmick and so on. Right now, so one of the things that we wanted to measure was how often do people sort of engage with a similar experience, right? So one interesting thing that came out was, say, for example, with something that we did with the postcards. We expected probably users will probably engage with it once or twice, and then maybe they just leave it, right? So we noticed that on an average, someone who's actually bought the postcard would use it for around 7 or 8 times, right? And it's a similar product that they're engaging with. So our assumption over here is there are 2 or 3 times which they're sort of using it for themselves, and the remaining they're probably showing it to their friends and family. And this is a fantastic way to spread the word. So that's a very important metric that we're working on, is looking at repeatability of usage.
Ashwin?
Yeah. So I'm going to take an example here with the dishwasher VR experience that we did with Bosch, right? So prior to the VR experience, what they do at marketing activations or stalls, they'd go to societies, offices, events, etc. They'd have a dishwasher with a transparent cover in front. What you'd see inside are basically clean dishes being washed through the day. And typically at these events, you expect people to make the decision to buy, right? So if a dishwasher, this costed somewhere around 28,000 to 32,000 rupees. What they were measuring was how many people would give a down payment of 5,000 rupees on spot and buy the device. When we replaced this with a virtual reality experience, that number jumped from around 5% to 35%, right? And which meant that people, once they tried this out within 3-4 short minutes, they were, of course, they already might have been considering it, etc. But seeing what it does, knowing for certain the benefits, and dispelling a lot of, say, misconceptions about the product with the VR experience, they were much more willing to buy, right? And this has been repeated across multiple projects. So with IFP specifically, when we in the showrooms where the VR headset was launched first, we saw typically twice as much sales were twice as much as other stores. Now, so this is purely considering the VR experience is launched. Now, when you do this, typically there's a lot of second degree marketing that happens as well, right? So when people put on the VR headset and they're trying it out, we take videos of those, we share it on all of the brand social media, etc. Right? You give away things like free giveaways. So say this is like a Google Cardboard headset. It's not the best quality VR experience, but it's something that they can take home. They can then scan the QR code here and see a 360-degree video of the same VR experience, and show on their phone, show it to all their friends, family, etc. And so when you enable things like this, you start, in general, the people's perception of the brand is one thing, but also hardcore sales itself starts increasing. So while that's maybe, I would say, just tangibly increasing sales, those are the kind of numbers and the kind of impact this technology can do. There's other stuff itself where you cannot really put a measure to it. So for example, in the automotive sector, right, if you consider any automotive brand out there, so they have a range of vehicles, and say there's the highest range SUV, say with Tata, that might be the Hexa. These are obviously the largest cars, and typically because of real estate limitations, right? If they have around 300 to 400 showrooms across the country, their SUV will only be in around 15% of showrooms, right? So around 70, 80 odd showrooms, something like that. at most. And so a lot of showrooms, customers are walking in, they want to see the vehicle, it's not there. They're asked to return again 2 days later when this dealer calls up another dealer, tells them to come over here. So that's where VR brings in a whole different, whatever your showroom size is, you walk in, you hand the headset over to them, they can put it on, they can see the car at scale, walk around it, sit inside it. And of course, as you get into more experiential stuff, you can start taking virtual test drives, etc., bringing what is usually limited to a launch event or the excitement is usually generated there, you bring it down to every customer who enters a showroom. And that is something that you can't really have a metric to measure, but the impact that that makes on a customer, how close it brings them to the buying decision is very immense with this kind of technology.
Yeah, great points. I mean, I think I can back those up, all of those with what we are seeing as well. I mean, I kind of think of it as there's 5 key areas that brands always look at, right? One is customer acquisition, conversion, retention. What is that doing to me from a pipeline perspective with this campaign? And then there's obviously what's my revenue uplift and what's my cost, right? So with the Flex example, let's talk about customer acquisition. They've been doing this in trade shows, right? Well, you don't need a trade show now. And think about it in a COVID environment, right? Where we don't know if trade shows will ever come back at that kind of scale. And even if they do, there might be fewer people attending. With a VR experience like what we developed, you don't need to leave your living room. If you can get an Oculus Go for $200 and boom, you can experience everything that Flex has to offer. So acquisition, I mean, tremendously higher. I can also give you an example from the travel space where we have a different company called Tripvana, and we are doing a lot of work on destination marketing for tourism boards, similar to what Vivek was talking about earlier. Most of this is 360 video, right? And it puts the person in the location, literally, gives them a very real sort of feeling of what it's like to be there. And in terms of acquisition, engagement, we're seeing numbers like 41% higher engagement, 28 times higher brand recall, 53% higher purchase intent. So going back to the point you were making, Ashwin, where people were ready to buy on the spot. And then in terms of cost, let's go back, talk about the Flex one, right? How much do you think it costs you to rent a floor space at a show like CES or the Detroit Motor Show? It's very expensive. If you're going to put a big car over there, you need a lot more floor space. If you're going to lug a bunch of automotive parts there, that's going to cost a lot of transportation money. And what's even worse about it is these shows are back to back, right? I have one in Las Vegas, ends on Friday. I have the next one on Monday in Detroit. I have the next one in Shanghai on the following Monday. So not only is it that you're spending so much, you're spending it on every single show because it's not portable. I can't take the car from Las Vegas to Detroit. Now you have 3 VR headsets, and that's it. Stick them in your, travel kit, in your suitcase, and take it on the plane, and you're done. It also helps with the customer experience center. Flex is using it in all their research facilities now. If a visitor comes in, they just put them in the VR experience, right? So there's many ways of measuring ROI, but I think the key point I'd make is every one of those dimensions: customer acquisition, customer conversion, customer retention, revenue uplift, and cost. On revenue uplift in the travel space, we're seeing something like 200% for a trip, right? And in other spaces, it's anywhere between like 8 to 20% or so. So it hits all of those metrics. But if that, so I guess then the next question really is, I mean, clearly XR has some benefits from experiential and immersive characteristics. There's ROI. So what's the adoption? Who's using this? How is that different between, say, 360 or VR or AR? So why don't you talk about it from an India perspective, first, and then I could give you some thoughts from what we're seeing here.
So, Anish, if I could come in here as well, I'd just like to say maybe our panelists can also tell us while they're talking about the adoption, what are some of the challenges that they see brands facing during that adoption. So maybe
Exactly. What are the drivers and the inhibitors? Yeah.
that's right.
So Ashwin, you want to go first this time, or?
Yes, sir. Yeah, sorry. Sure. So I think comparing India to the West, there are definitely some um, basic foundational differences, right? First of all, if you're talking about the VR ecosystem first, the Oculus Quest is the device that we've been waiting for. It's a VR device which is very easy to set up. It's literally just a gadget that you can buy for $400 off Amazon, and you wear the headset, two controllers, you're ready to go. No inertia. It's just very simple, right? But the first problem was that it's not launched in India. Right? So from an enterprise perspective, if you want to buy it, it's hard to procure, and of course, issues like service maintenance, you're paying a premium because of import duty, and so that's something that you need to that brands need to keep in mind, right? Then, but from an AR perspective, it's definitely something that with web AR especially, right? What's enabled web AR to become a reality in specifically in the last year or so is the fact that these browsers have gotten certain updates, etc. These features have come out of beta, and all of a sudden, every smartphone out there or every browser out there is now capable of that. So AR is something that even in the short term you can utilize, and I think that's an example. Shraval, if you could play that, if you could play the second video. Yeah, so this is something that we built for Coach, right? So Coach builds premium handbags. So I think if you can start playing the video again, um, there used to be inertia around AR apps before because you would have to download an entire application, and of course you can view it on Snapchat, Facebook, etc. But that's those platforms have a limitation, right? Here, this is on your website. You just go to a link, you can see the 3D model, look around it, etc., and then put it in your space, right? So if you'll see that once you see the 3D model, you can then place it. So specifically with Coach, what people were concerned about was whether it's an accessory, right? A handbag doesn't match your clothes, etc. So you can actually put it in your space, walk around, look at it. The quality of the 3D model here is something that I'd like to highlight, because again, this level of quality is usually something that you would associate with a very high, heavy model, like which might take too long to load over the internet. I'm not sure if the video stopped. Oh, it's fine. Anyway, but yeah, this is something which, if you could just play the, okay, it's fine. This is something which now, because of the advances in the web, you're able to load it even in, say, the relatively slower internet speeds that you have here, and of course, with the increasing adoption of 4G, and eventually when 5G comes in as well, you're going to start seeing this as something that's prevalent, or rather what customers are going to start expecting from any product that they're trying to buy online, right? So in terms of which sectors will adopt this first, I think right now we're seeing the sectors that where this is adding most value are things like so of course the automotive industries, furniture, then say art, for instance, home appliances, where the fit of the object is very important, right? An important part of your decision making process. Where will I keep this dishwasher I buy? Where will I keep this sofa set or whatever that I buy? And AR helps you view that instantly and make that buying decision, right? So and this is something that already e-commerce giants in India, Flipkart, Amazons, etc., are developing. You'll see that launch in a few months. So that's where AR is maybe going to enter first. But as you can see with these handbags, as you can see with general e-commerce products, as companies get used to creating 3D models and working with AR and VR and these kind of technologies, you're going to see it become a lot more widespread.
Yeah, yeah. Ashwin or Vivek, you want to add anything? Or?
Yeah. So one
Sorry,
thing
Advait.
yeah, sure, no problem. In India, obviously, I think for VR adoption at scale, it's going to take a long time because of the just the price of the device, I think. And I mean, as Ashwin said, the Oculus is not even available for sale in India. We had to get it from the US and tinker around with it. So I think for VR, it's more at an enterprise level. The good thing is adoption in India for AR is really good, primarily because of the massive number of users on Instagram and Facebook. So social AR is leading the way in augmented reality adoption in India, basically led by Facebook and Instagram. And Snapchat has recently become number 2 in India in terms of globally. If you look at Snapchat numbers, most number of active users, number 1 is US and number 2 is India. They just, I think in the last 1-2 quarters, they went up there. And Snapchat has just opened a new office. They're putting a lot of effort, trying to get more people to use that app. So I think these 3 platforms are driving AR adoption and, getting users to know what is AR, change consumer behavior, understand what is AR. The final point that I'd like to make is very, very similar to what Ashwin made about web AR, right? So forget about Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. Every smartphone that you have now has a pretty powerful web browser, right? So if you bought your smartphone in the last 3 or 4 years, then it probably supports web AR. And most of us, we use a smartphone for about 2 to 3 years and keep switching. So with web AR, very similar to what Ashwin and team have done with Coach, we did something very similar with the furniture brand, where you pick a chair or pick a table and you flip the camera and place it in the surface and have a look. So in terms of adoption for web AR, I think it's going to be very fast. Now, there's one particular augmented reality experience that not many of us have touched upon, which I think is going to explode later this year or sometime next year, which is in-app AR. So your Amazons of the world, your Flipkarts of the world, what they're going to start doing is they're going to have an augmented reality layer in the app itself, where before I buy the lipstick, I try it on. Before I buy the glasses, I try it on. Before I buy the washing machine or the refrigerator, it asks you for access to the camera and you place the product. So because at the end of the day, your e-commerce players, what are they looking for? More time spent on the app, higher conversion rates. And AR in app is only going to improve that. In terms of what are the sectors that are hot, right now for us, there's a lot of interesting work we're doing in media and entertainment and auto. And I think going forward, it's going to be a lot of, we're going to be doing a lot of work in e-commerce, in home appliances, as Ashwin said, furniture, already doing some work there. Travel was actually a big sector for us. We were doing very interesting work there with, Dubai Expo 2020, a lot of the airlines and Singapore tourism and all of these places where they, we can, with AR, we teleport you to a different location. But, given COVID-19, I think that is going to take a few months to, recoup.
Thank you. Vivek, you want to tell us?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of things, right? So where, in terms of very specifically, say adoption of AR, right? I think we are okay. So with what the internet was in the say late 90s and early 2000, where people were just warming up to internet and understanding what it can do, building websites. I think AR is there today, right? There's still a lot of exploration, a lot of experimentation that's happening, right? So it's so I think in the last maybe 8 years, like Advait said, there's a lot of experimentation that has happened. A lot of use cases have been built, right? Now they have to go to scale. Of course, the digital AR experiences like the Instagram filters and so on, I think probably India is the largest market in the world for something of that sort. But if you look at, say, like a print to AR, or if you're looking at visualization and so on, as of now, it's been very experimental. Right? Now, two things. Pre-COVID, all of these experiences were good to have. Right? Now, post-COVID, I think it's very clear that these are all must-have experiences. And this is very clear from a lot of inquiries that we've been getting from different industries. And I'm sure the rest of the panelists will also agree in terms of the number of inquiries they must be getting at this point in time. So maybe COVID helps probably will help the AR and VR industry in a way. So that's probably the silver lining out of COVID for the industry per se. The other challenge is the awareness. Right now, I mean, just a quick thing about. So this is something that we were pitching with the Telangana tourism. All right, so which meant I had to actually go to Hyderabad, and I met with one of the senior officers there, and the start of the meeting was very cold. Okay, so what is it, and so on, right? And then I had to spend sort of around 25 minutes explaining how this works, actually show her some of the things that we do, and then she actually spent 2 hours with us. And by end of the meeting, she wanted us to submit a proposal, and within a week's time, they even approved the proposal. So now the challenge here today is how much of time and energy do we have to be able to go and talk to people and create that awareness. So that's another challenging situation. But having said that, like I said, there's a lot of startups like us, right? We've done a lot of experiments. We have tons of demos. I was more than tempted to put those demos onto this, but I understand that we have a limitation of time. But I think agencies can use a lot of those demos to go and show it to clients. And I think, I don't know if future is only AR or VR, but a lot of businesses, small and medium businesses who haven't had a digital presence, I think they will jump onto the AR, VR bandwagon directly versus going through website and then e-commerce and then Flipkart and so on. I think a lot of small and medium businesses will just jump into AR and VR bandwagon. Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry, Tina, you were going to say?
Yeah, so while he mentions that, there also seems to be a concern about whether marketers and brands will have post-COVID budgets. So Anish, when you come in, if you can throw light on that as well, it would be nice if we could cover that.
Yeah, sure. I think, as I mentioned earlier, right, one of the key things to think about with experiential is don't think about it just in terms of the upfront cost, right? It is the amortization of the investment is much higher because it's an experiential portable experience that you can either carry on a even a cardboard headset, as Ashwin said, which is like a couple of bucks, or it's on your phone, on your device, right? And the fact that it gives you reach anytime, anywhere, that's really important, especially in a COVID environment where the customer is not coming to your store or not able to view the product physically in a retail outlet, right? Being able to take the product, your experience, your brand to the customer anytime, anywhere, that's the value that you get from it. So I would really think about it in terms of the lifetime value of the investment of that budget, right? Which brings me, we have a couple of minutes. I do want to leave the conversation with some tips for our audience, right? So if we wanted to suddenly go out and start doing XR experiences for brands, but haven't done one before, what are some best practices or tips that you would have?
So maybe one of the panelists can give us that. What do brands start with? What do agencies support brands with? Any one of you can take it, and we can extend this by another 10 minutes because we do have a couple of questions from participants as well. So one of you go ahead with it, and then maybe we can touch upon something else.
So, given that we've actually worked with a few agencies for this, I can tell you, there's a few things to keep in mind, right? So the first thing is, a brand shouldn't be doing AR for the sake of doing it. My competitor is doing it, so let me also do it. I think that's a very wrong approach because then it'll just become a race to the bottom. Oh, they did this, so I want to do something similar, blah, blah, blah. So I think that is a very, very wrong approach. Now, how do you decide if you want to do an AR or a VR experience? There's 3-4 kind of questions that the brand manager, the account manager that's managing the brand. So the first question is, where is the audience and who is the audience? Now, if you want to build a niche experience that has to be experienced only in a store or only have a limited number of audience. Let's say you're building something for an Audi or a Mercedes Benz. So you have a very limited niche audience. So you don't need to build something that reaches scale, right? So first question is, who is the audience and where is the audience? Now, based on that, you decide, do you want to do AR or VR? And once you decide what you want to do, AR or VR, then let's come to the question of what exactly are you trying to achieve? Is this a product launch? Is this for engagement? Are you trying to drive sales? Are you trying to get people to visit your website? Are you trying to get people to experience something on AR and then get them to visit your store? So ask all these questions. Or is it just product discovery? You want them to know more about the product? I think based on all these questions, and once you have the right answer to these questions, given the array of solutions that you have, whether it's AR on web, AR on social, VR with a headset, VR with putting your phone in a device and keeping and putting it on, like Google Cardboard. So, and is it, or do you just need to do a 360 image or just a 3D of an object? So I think once you have answers to these questions, like what's your objective, who's the audience, then you can decide what is the right approach. I think that's a good way to look at it. And I think another very important thing is, at the end of the day, what is the budget? How much is the brand willing to spend? Whatever it is, some of these things do cost money. Building a 3D model of a product is sometimes expensive. Building a VR experience is a pretty extensive process. It is sometimes expensive. So I think budget is another constraint or a factor that you got to keep in mind. I think if you factor in all these, you'll be able to arrive at what should be my first step into building an XR or an AR or a VR experience. And the other panelists or Anish can add, or Tina can add.
Yeah, those are great points. I'd just add one small thing, and then we'll just get to Q&A. I think you also really have to think about how you integrate the experience with, say, an existing mobile app or whatever else is already there for the brand. Don't talk about this as if it's XR, as if it's a technology. Snapchat, they does this beautifully. They don't even call it AR. They call it a lens. And as far as the customer is concerned, it's a lens or it's a filter. They don't know if it's AR. They don't know if it's VR. It doesn't matter to them, right? So really think about it from a very customer-centric view rather than how does this sort of just blend into whatever else the brand is trying to do.
And just to quickly, if I can add something to what Tina had said earlier as well regarding the spending. So this is something that over the last 4 years, we've seen so many brands across the world, and including in India here and in tier 2, tier 3 towns in India, the metrics that, if done well, the metrics that you can get from these VR or AR projects are very, very good. But the fact is that it's required companies to adopt like a first principles approach and do it really well. So all these metrics are impossible to get if you take a short-term fix, if you just try to do something just for the sake of using VR, saying I did a VR project, I did an AR project, right? But instead, and there are plenty of examples out there, including like what Advait and Vivek have touched upon and what we've done here, that show that if you leverage the technology well, you can create some real impact. So now, considering spending budgets are low, and of course, customers are not going to be spending for a few months while things bounce back to some sort of new normal. It's the right time to invest in technologies that you think can create an impact in the short term, but also long term, over 5-10 years. And we know that we are considering how the consumer ecosystem has started booming during this lockdown period, right? VR had stuff flying off the shelf, and brands are this is basically a nice opportunity for brands to invest in this technology and wait to reap the benefits over the long term.
Okay, there's a question that's coming from one of our viewers, and interesting. Maybe one of the Anish, maybe the Indian panelists can answer this
Sure.
from here, because it says, why does the work from India lack in providing hyper realistic and super fast content delivery solutions? And this, I guess, would really kill our adoption as well, no? So quickly, maybe one of you can, quickly in a minute sum it up for us, because there are more questions that I'd like to, ask.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Why does the work from India?
Lack in providing hyper realistic and super fast content delivery solutions.
I think that's maybe just so.
A perception?
Yeah, I would say that there are enough companies out there in India as well doing really good work. Okay, so the problem is not a problem, right? It is so VR. A lot of people who get into VR, AR, the developers are driven by passion, right? And so and now with the internet, all these tutorials, working with Unity, working with Unreal Engine, making a VR, AR experience is very easy. And so you have a lot of, especially considering the number of developers we have in the country, right? So people are excited by technology, they play around with it. That doesn't mean they're necessarily experts at it, right? So there's obviously a lot of people, especially your IT firms, your giant IT firms, who get into the space because they have the capability to build it, but that doesn't mean that they have that expertise in it. But I think if you do see the companies who are focused solely on this technology are building from the ground up for it and not just trying to shoehorn, pre-existing skill sets onto this, that's where you'll see real quality. And that's true across the world as well. There is an abundance of really poor quality experiences, but at the tip of the iceberg, and typically, again, just follow the impact of the projects. The ones which have highest impact have at their ground very, very high quality experiences there, and there are enough companies from India doing that as well.
So, what about adoption of holograms? And maybe Advait, you want to tell us something, or Vivek, you can throw light on that.
So, I have a slightly different take or answer to this, right? Given that we've been doing this for about 2-3 years, there is a very wrong notion that both AR and VR as a technology is a very complex technology, and it's as if it's we need some really high-end developers, and it's extremely complex. And the reason I'm saying this is the answer to one of your the questions that they asked is, if you ask me, our most successful AR experiences have been where we put more time, money, effort, and investment in design and 3D, and not in the development part. So when we invest a lot of time and effort in perfecting that 3D and perfecting that animation and perfecting that the UI and the UX, that we've seen comes out much better and has much more usage versus something that's technologically much more advanced, right? So 70% I think is more design, UI, UX, and 3D, and 30% tech. The tech and the development is actually not very complex. It's pretty straightforward. If you have a good set of decent developers who can figure it out, it's not that hard. The complicated part, and where the question arose from, is because I think they probably would have seen a lot of experiences from India that look bad and don't feel right. And that's because the right amount of investment has not gone into the design part and the 3D part and the animation part of the project.
So I think that's a good point, because one of our viewers has also said that the visual quality doesn't seem to appeal, so therefore it's not engaging enough. So yes, it does matter. Anish, can a multi-brand mattress outlet use VR to virtually increase inventory the way the SUV example was mentioned? So do you think you want to come in with some thoughts over there?
Yes, sure, absolutely. So the answer is yes, because the thing about VR, just as Ashwin was talking about earlier, is it gives you a very realistic view of the product, right? Everything from the features to the configurability of the product. And so whether it's a mattress or it's a coffee machine or it's an automobile or whatever the product is, given the point that Advait was making earlier, if you design it the right way, the experience, I think absolutely VR can be very beneficial there. There's also a question about, can it only be experienced through a device, or it can be experienced on individual screens as well? The question is really one about immersion. What's the level of immersion? So there is a way of doing VR on the web. It's called web VR, right? And what you do there is you create a VR experience, except you're seeing it on a 2-dimensional screen, And when you pop on a headset, you just go to the browser and you click a button and it goes into the full sort of 360 mode, right? So the question is, if you want the full immersive experience, yes, headset, but it doesn't have to be. You can still do a lot of the 3D experience and so on through web VR. Also, the headset doesn't have to be an Oculus Quest. Now, technology has improved a lot. There are, cheaper headsets coming onto the market, and that will continue to be the case. But it again, it depends on, are you doing a simplistic kind of mass market thing, or are you doing something that's much more sort of requires the visual sort of quality, right? Going back to the point about cheap VR and bad VR, there are cases where a cardboard is more than enough. For a lot of the travel experiences, just having a $2 cardboard headset and looking at it in 360 is probably enough. Whereas if you want me to look at a Tata Hexa and really explore it and configure it, yeah, now you probably need really high quality inside a headset.
That's fair. Thanks for sharing that with us. So I think we've come to a close with that, because we've taken most questions and some of the others are covering or touching upon what you've already covered. Vivek, do you want to say something? Please come in.
Just a quick one, right? So there is
Yes.
some good news in sense. There's a lot of, depending on the use case, there's a lot of content that has already been created, right? Billions of videos and maybe billions of 360s and images. Those can be actually beautifully used in augmented reality and maybe VR too. So I think there is sort of a block that we need really new content. I think a lot of existing content can beautifully be used, and we can add a lot of context to the content. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, because there are even 3D models, not just 360. I mean, if you go to a site like Sketchfab, or there's a lot of these stores now where you can download very high quality 3D models at a fairly reasonable price. So you don't have to build everything from scratch.
Thank you for sharing that. We will try and close over here. If there is an interest in hearing more from our panelists specifically, then do write to us on our social handles, and we'll see if we can come back with another version of further details of how to make the most of AR and VR. I'm going to give the space to my colleague on the management committee, Arunav, and please propose a vote of thanks, and over to you.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Advait, Ashwin, Vivek, and Anish. Thanks. It's a very insightful session we had. We learned a lot from you guys. Thank you, Tina, for hosting it very nicely. And thanks our partners, webinar partners, at Googly, Media News for you, sorry. And everyone in that club from at Club Delhi, Chennai, Kochi. Thank you.
And we'd also like to thank all of you for participating today and coming in. Thank you so much. And all the management committee members of the Ad Club who supported us in putting this together. Please stay connected and come on board the Ad Club. We'd be happy to have all of you as members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We'll hold on a few minutes. The panelists, if you want to stay, we can stay on. We still have 62 participants, so we'll allow them to disengage.
Sure.
Thank you, Anish. Thank you, Advait. Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you, Vivek.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Lovely discussion, and we all had a good time. Learned a lot from the sessions.
Thank you, Arvind, sir. Thank you so much.
There are a lot of rich content, and there was so much that they could have shared more. I'm sure there was a lot more each of them wanted to tell us.
Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
suppose we could have a session 2 of this
Yeah.
We can.
continuation.
We can.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we sort of overshot the time limit on a few questions.
That's okay. That's okay. That was expected, and we also wanted it that way because eventually we wanted to see how many more questions are there. How many did we answer everything,
I think we did
Tina?
4 out of 6.
No, there are a few more we are didn't answer actually.
Yeah.
Just very small ones, actually. Not,
Mm.
not. There's something difference between a brand and image of any commercial individual or establishments, which was not very clear, and therefore we left. Anish picked up the one with devices on it, and we spoke about image quality. Ashwin has posted photorealistic coach bag, so that was pretty much also covered. Holograms is the one I asked you with. There was a little bit on that. So